Welcome to DNA Clarity and Support. I'm your host, Brian. Listen as I chat with authors and leaders in the DNA world about the family and personal impacts of DNA testing. You'll hear news stories, unique perspectives, find out about books, websites, organizations, other podcasts for those involved in the world of DNA. Please be sensitive to younger listeners as the conversations can get intense at times. This is a production of Watershed DNA. Learn more at watersheddna.com. Today we have with us Katie Hopkins. Katie is the author of Exposed by DNA, which is the story of her own discovery of misattributed parentage. And Katie's here today to answer some questions. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So your own DNA discovery is not just one, really. It includes multiple discoveries in your own family. And it started not with your own discovery of misattributed parentage, but for someone else. For those who haven't yet read your book, could you summarize kind of how you came to be writing your book?
Yes. I was writing my book actually as the events were happening in real time, except for the last chapter. I started off writing about the dynamics of my family, just introducing everybody. My parents, I have 3 siblings, Lucy, Denise, and Greg, and I'm the youngest. Back in I guess I was in my 20s, I started helping my dad with genealogy here and there. And as he was getting older, he asked me if I would take all his documents. And it was a lot of photos, a lot of albums, because none of my other siblings were really interested in genealogy. It was just me. And he wanted me to pass along to his grandchildren all the genealogy documents. So I promised him I'd do that. So the whole thing started as I was looking through his genealogy, and I found a love letter that he had written my mom in 1954. And I started reading the letter. At first, it didn't really mean much to me. And then I started noticing the dates of it. And my dad came back. He was in the military during the Korean War, and he came back home in January of 1955. He had written this letter in 1954 talking about he would see my mom in January of 55. Well, my sister was born in June of 55. And I started counting, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he can't be the biological father of my oldest sister, Lucy. So I just, was shocked. We always joked with my sister and Lucy over the years because she had dark hair and all of us had blonde hair and blue eyes, and she has dark hair and brown eyes. And we just joked about it all the time and kept saying she must be my mom's friend's child. And so it just became a sibling joke. And then after I did DNA years ago, I ended up having all of my DNA was in the database. And I ended up having just a dilemma. I didn't really know what to do with the information I had, knowing that my sister was not my dad's child. So my sister Denise, who can't keep anything to herself, has a conversation with our father, probably after drinking too many glasses of wine. And she told our father to tell Lucy the truth, who was her father. So this all led to my dad contacting me, and he confessed to me that Lucy wasn't his father. He raised her and loved her as his own. He explained to me that my mom was pregnant when he got back from the military, and he loved her and wanted to marry her. They had been childhood sweethearts. So he proceeded to tell me he didn't know the identity of Lucy's biological father. My mom would never tell him. And I basically told him that he needed to tell Lucy this information because it was not my story to tell her. And she ended up finding out from my father. And it just, a whole bunch of events happened. And I ended up mapping Lucy's DNA, looking for a common link to find her biological father through Ancestry, since my DNA was already in the database. And it showed that her and I were half sisters. So I ended up finding her father pretty quickly because of a DNA match to one of her biological father's cousins. And moving forward, Lucy ended up meeting her biological father. And that was a whole nother story. He suspected that Lucy was his child, but my mom didn't tell him and said that it wasn't. There was a lot of stuff my mom had done that I just really didn't understand why she did it. I still don't understand. Then later, Lucy suggested to me that I get my father's DNA to confirm that he's actually my father. And I just was shocked. I was like, well, that sounds crazy to me.
Because you hadn't really had any reason to suspect your...
Yeah, I was like my father in so many ways. We loved history. We had a passion for animals. There was so much my dad and I connected on. It was amazing. And I just thought, you've lost your mind. I look like him. I've got blue eyes. I'm just thinking all these things. And my dad never used a computer in his life. He never had a credit card. He's just really old fashioned. So basically I kind of scammed him. I said, hey, I got you an early birthday present. Come on over. So he came over to my house, showed him the DNA kit. And he, was really into just history and wanted to know where he came from. So he spit in the tube really quick and off it went in the mail and came back with his results. And he was happy because I took his results of where he came from and I laminated it into a big chart so he could see it. And he was just happy, never asked me any other questions, not understanding anything.
And he didn't really ask about the family matching aspect of the testing?
No, he didn't ask anything about anything, like who am I matching? He just wanted to know, was he English or where he came from. Mm-hmm. So after his results came back, that's when I found out he wasn't my father. And I was shocked. So of course I went and confronted my mother about the DNA results. My sister Lucy was kind of shocked, I think, that I was going over to talk to our mother, but I just couldn't keep this. I needed to know. When I confronted her, she wouldn't tell me. I asked her many times over a period of months. She was only really concerned about me not telling my dad he wasn't my biological father. And I told her, I'm not telling him, I'm not breaking his heart. My parents they'd been married for over 60 years. So basically, my mom led me on a journey of leads and then leads that really didn't help me. Her health wasn't real good. You could tell she was getting dementia. My mom has Parkinson's. So I just, based on her information, I was looking at different aspects of who could be my father. I mean, I'm going through the whole friends list of everybody I knew when I was a child that was around us, just going through all kinds of stuff. And everything was leading me to dead ends. So my friend Janet helped me. We spent 2 years searching and mapping our DNA. I had my DNA on MyHeritage family DNA site. Can't remember what that is.
Family DNA?
Yeah. And then there was GEDmatch. I was on every site I could be on.
Mm-hmm. And the goal was you were still trying to identify who was your biological father at that point.
Yes.
And Janet was your friend who, her role was like a search assistant for you, essentially, it sounds like.
Yes.
Like she had the experience with understanding the DNA and how it works with genealogy.
Yes, Janet she was like a little sister to me. We grew up together. She was the neighbor of mine. So we were really close. And she was really into genealogy at the time and did a lot of stuff on databases, which I did not at that time. So we we were both on the computer for, sometimes 12 hours a day, both of us, and just going back and forth on the phone and just trying to figure this out, mapping everything we could possibly map. Because a long time ago on Ancestry, they really, the database wasn't huge as it is now. I mean, even 5 years ago. So my closest DNA match was a third cousin that I couldn't get to respond. Mm-hmm. And even that, you share a third great grandparent and, times it by both sides. It's a lot of people to go back on. So we were just mapping it and trying to find a common link for a long time. And in the end, it finally worked out where I found this woman. I called her Susan in my book. She ended up having two brothers that gave me a clue that had some contact where my mother was working. And at the time, I contacted her through an obituary of all things. And she gave me some information, and it led me to find out that one of her brothers most likely was my biological father. So in the end of my book, I left it hanging as P.S. he did DNA, because at the time the DNA results hadn't come back. So I wasn't sure, and I just ended my book. But since then, the DNA results came back, and Ryan in my book was my confirmed through DNA he did that we were half siblings. So now I knew who my biological father was. So the closure finally came.
So your book was published in 2018, and it's 3 years later now. And you now have a chapter 33 that you will be adding to the book or making available to readers who are curious and finding out in the next chapter. So have you had any new relationships begin to form with genetic relatives since the chapter 33 results came in?
Yes, I ended up meeting my half brother and my half aunt, Susan, in 2018. It was in November, I believe. And then I ended up meeting my biological father at the same time on a trip up north. And he knew my mom and told me a little bit about their relationship. We talked a lot of genealogy. I seemed to know more about his family than he did, which was kind of funny. And I've gone to visit 2 times now since then. But the relationship, it's very interesting. They're different people than I am. It's just kind of interesting, I guess. I don't know what to say other than I don't know if we'll continue to have a relationship. So far, the contact has been very far and few. I was raised totally different than this side of the family. And it just, I don't know, the connection just still is not there.
Something that I noticed that it was a point you made at multiple points in your book is that communication is so vital. And that's something that your parents were maybe not the best at, and were not the best at teaching you and guiding you as you grew up about how to communicate openly and honestly. So how did you learn the importance of communication, and when that was not a part of your family of origin?
Well, my parents, they were very good teaching all of us morals and values and right and wrong. I guess if they didn't, I wouldn't have turned out the way I did. Communication just was not something that was easy for them, or even me growing up. But as I've gotten older, even younger, I kept a secret that I was gay for many years. I know that they knew, but it just never was talked about. But again, that's hard for a lot of kids, and that's a whole different topic for another podcast. But in my own career path, I guess I had to communicate. When I was young, I worked fast food. I managed a retail store as a young adult. I did all kinds of things. I was a private investigator, retired as a cop. So I interviewed hundreds of people and had to talk all the time. So then growing into adulthood, communication just, I guess, came naturally to me.
Did your mother ever end up opening up about the circumstances of your conception, or your sister? Was that a type of communication that ever ended up happening?
No, my mom just pretty much kept stuff to herself. And after all of this, actually, I felt sorry for my mom. I know my parents loved one another, but I don't think they were in love. My mom just did everything for her kids' sake. That's what she did end up telling me. Unfortunately, my mom passed away in 2019. And, I felt sorry for her, sad for somebody to have to hold onto those secrets. And sometimes I try to understand why. And I believe she did it for her kids to have a better life. And I realize that now. At the time, I think I was just more frustrated because this was just shocking news to me.
And the answers weren't forthcoming either. So
Not at all.
Your sister's bio father search wrapped up really quickly compared to yours. And
the search for her father was so easy. I mean, it only took a couple weeks, and it was just getting someone to respond to an email, but it was very quick. Mine just seemed to take forever. And then after all of that, I let Lucy do it on her own time because she didn't want to tell our other siblings that she met her father, and she just didn't want to tell them a lot of things. And she's a very private person. So I understand that. And when she ended up finally telling them, we ended up having both of our other siblings, Denise and Greg, do DNA. And we've come to find out that out of all four of us, there's only one child that's actually my dad's biological child.
That had a different impact on each sibling in the family as well. I remember you wrote that for Lucy, it seemed to you that knowing that her father was not your dad made her feel better. Could you talk a little bit about what that meant?
Yeah. After I had mapped her DNA and found her biological father, he actually came to town so she could meet him. And he was very open with meeting her. And he told us about his relationship with my mother. And Lucy, again, she didn't want to tell her other two siblings yet. She wanted to keep it quiet. And I just think that she really needed time to process everything. And she is a very private person. We're so different in many ways. Eventually, she told our other siblings, but she never said anything to our parents. And of course, my sister Denise, who can't keep anything to herself, told our father that Lucy ended up meeting her biological father. And Lucy always still had the communication gap with our parents. It's funny because my wife always tells me she doesn't know how I'm part of that family because I'm a communicator.
And you were the one that's written a book out to help other people. So I think that's commendable for you to have taken what was an up and down journey for you and to be writing about it while it was all taking place.
Yes, thank you.
It's really important for communicators to use that skill.
I took it as a healing step. It just kind of putting stuff on paper. I guess it's like when people journal. Writing in a journal just is the same thing as kind of what I was doing. Time definitely, helps heal. So
you also talked about other things that you turn to that helps you heal. So Reiki and meditation and energy work has been a part of your life. And
yes,
writing your book.
Yes.
And talking about it. Do you find it helpful still today to talk about everything that happened in 2018 and prior?
Yeah, I do. I think the best thing for me is time has helped me heal. There's still a lot to process and understand. It's been a lot of events that have happened in 5 years for me. I'm 55 years old. This all started when I was 50. And sometimes I sit back and I look and I think, God, I found out my dad wasn't my biological father. Then my best friend dies from cancer. Our dog dies suddenly. My mom dies in 2019. And now I'm caring for my frail father. Then the most recent, my sister-in-law dies of a heart attack about 6 months ago, drops dead at 59 years old. So I always tell people, I'm like, for me, it's been time that's helped me heal, but grieving is a totally different story. That's been hard for me to find the time to do.
Yeah. Humor, you mentioned, has been a medicine for you. And it's hard to talk about humor right after thinking of how many losses you've had, just one right after another. How do you find the resilience and the ability to keep a sense of humor when things get so rough?
I have always found humor in everything. And I like funny shows. I love Seinfeld, Big Bang Theory, all these just shows that make me laugh. And now I've really gotten into all the British series, just humor. I don't know. It makes life interesting. And I'm not I hate feeling sad. And I always just laugh at life. I mean, the things that just happen sometimes, that's all you can do is laugh. I mean, otherwise some people be miserable, and feeling sad's not fun. So I guess I just choose humor.
Yeah. So when it's time to kick back on a weekend and you're going through Netflix, you're not seeking out the true crime series shows or the dramas. It's the humor, it's the comedies. And
yeah, no, I like the comedy. I like comedies. I do like just different. The one show I just found that's on, I think it's Netflix or one, is Back to Life, or Episodes. Both of them are hysterical. Episodes is very funny. They're just comedies, British comedies, which are now my favorite thing to watch on television.
We love Young Sheldon. You mentioned Big Bang Theory, which yes. I was a fan of that as well. And then Young Sheldon. My two older kids are 13 and 10. And during the pandemic, we had to find things to binge watch together. And one of them was Young Sheldon. And we all just loved it. It's just so funny. Yeah.
The humor in that is that we watch that too. We still tape that all the time to watch it. Curious how the season's going to go, if it's going to be the end. Yeah. I haven't read anything about it, but yeah, you have to watch Back to Life. There's 2 seasons.
Write that one down.
That's a funny one. And so is Episodes. And there's a actress in there that actually wrote the story. It's Daisy Haggard. She's the main character in Back to Life, and she is hysterical. She's a brilliant writer.
Awesome. Have you heard of Jane the Virgin?
No.
That one is interesting. It has NPE themes all throughout all of the different storylines. And it's like a telenovela, but written for an American audience. That's another one that I got a lot of laughs out during COVID.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that.
So what encouragement do you have for people who find themselves in the place where you were, where it's taking a really long time and a lot of work to get a close enough match to figure out where you fit in someone else's family tree?
Right. I always have said to people, and I've helped many of people through this, and even after this, I always tell people, if you're a friend or somebody, just be supportive. The right words are very hard to come by. I mean, it's definitely a shocking event. I've had people out of the blue say to me, "Oh, that's not a big deal." And I just, probably gave them the look of death, because then it hit me like it is a big deal.
It is.
It definitely changes the way you see your family. It makes you reevaluate everything you've done in your life. I always ask a lot of questions to myself. I always ask, what if? What if? I think it's a healing process that a lot of people have. Some people do better than others. Definitely a support group of some sort. My wife has always been my best support. She's always told me that, I have a great life. My parents raised me well and always was there encouraging me. What was really interesting is my best friend who died of cancer, she told me right before she died, she said, "You will find your father when you're meant to find him." Mm-hmm. And it was so true, because it happened at a perfect point in my life. I truly believe that people, things happen the way they're supposed to happen. I was 50 when when I found out my dad wasn't my dad and I was more mature to handle stuff. I just think that just the whole process of healing and just going through it with support, definitely you need that support.
And it's important for people to not invalidate your feelings.
Right. And you just, never give up. I always tell people, never give up. It takes one little teeny clue, whether it's, something, just an obituary, just something that you're reading. I think that's what happened with me was I was, reading. It's how I found my Aunt Susan. I was reading an obituary and I was just reading comments that people had written about this man. And she had written something that made me realize she was I believe at the time, she would have been a niece of someone in that family that I was reading about. And that was the one clue I needed. And it just happened to pop out for me.
So it's that one clue might be the key to figuring it out. Yeah. And bringing in a search assistant too might be something that could help something that could help someone else who kind of gets stuck in their search. You had your friend Janet there to assist you in the search.
Right. Having more eyes than one looking at stuff helps a lot.
So do you have any thoughts for parents who might be keeping a secret regarding their child's parentage or paternity from them?
There's a couple different points that I have about that. I always will believe that secrets do come out in time. And when mine came out, it kind of made me look at my mom a little differently. Not so much in a bad way, but I felt like I didn't know my mom. Like, who is this woman? It was just like, she was kind of like a spy to me or somebody. I don't know. I didn't really understand that. I do believe secrets will come out. But then again, on my side, I also am still keeping the secret that my dad is not my biological father. My father is going to be 89 next month, and he is also showing dementia. And all of my siblings, we all agreed when all this came out that we would never tell him because no one wanted to break his heart. And I honestly, talking to other people about keeping that secret, I didn't want to say most, all the people that I've ever told have said, don't tell your father. It would break him. So for me, that's, a secret of my keeping. Is that right or wrong? I won't know that answer. I hope one day when my dad is gone and he's wherever he's going, he will understand why I kept that from him. But I do believe parents really need to tread lightly and think of the outcome of how your kid's going to react. And is it better to wait till they're older? I think that it helped me to not to know this until I was older. And I look at, if I would have known it and my biological father would have raised me or had any part of my life, I would have turned out completely different. I came from a very loving family. My parents were very loving to me. And his side of the family, they're very, not to really talk bad about them, but they're different. I see a lot of selfishness. There's no love. Like, they don't know how to love. And it makes me wonder where I would have been.
So for you, what has upset you more is not who your biological father was, but the fact that there was a secret kept about it. Is that a fair summary?
No, because I don't even know. I think it was just a shock. Like, how could my mother keep these secrets? It just amazed me. It just left me without words, probably for the first time in my life. I don't know what the answer is when people, in my book, I also wrote about, there was a chapter in there about adoption. I have 3 good friends that wrote their adoption stories for me. And I noticed the similarities in how we felt in talking with them. And one of the adoption stories in there is my friend Sydney, and her and I are very close. And she has siblings that she has not good connections with, just like I do, which is crazy. I never thought in my life I'd be telling anybody that I have 4 siblings in my life. Well, really 5, and we're all half siblings. All of us have different fathers.
It just wasn't the story of your life that you built your personal identity around.
No. So then you start questioning stuff and just where would I have been? How would I have been raised? My brother Ryan, who in the end, the PS he did DNA, and he said to me before, I wish I was raised by your parents. And it just made me realize, and I realize this every day seeing my dad now, that I'm thankful that I didn't know, because they were the best parents I could have asked for.
That's an amazing way to end our conversation today. Do you think there will be a chapter 34 and 35 and 36? Do you think you'll write a follow-up at some point in the future?
I don't. Sometimes I laugh and I think, God, I wish somebody would pick up this book as a comedy. It would be a great comedy show. If I could write a screenplay, I would write a screenplay for it. I don't know. I think the ending, writing the next chapter 33, I definitely want to have that added to the original book after it's copyrighted and added into anybody that gets the book within, next year, I hope, early next year. But with the chapter 33, I'm still, like I said, I think we talked about it. I'm just trying to figure out how I want to let other people read the last chapter without having to buy the book again.
Yeah.
So maybe we can figure something out.
Yeah, we'll figure out a way. We will make it work. We will make it happen.
Yeah, I don't know about writing anymore after that. I really would have liked to have detailed more about my family, but then again, I don't know that they would have liked that. So kind of left it as it is. And it wasn't really about them. It was about me.
Well, if you ever do write that screenplay, you are welcome to come back on and talk with me again about that. Love
the comedy.
The comedy version.
The comedy version.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
You can find a copy of Katie's book, Exposed by DNA, on Amazon. And you can also follow her on Twitter. I'll put the handle in the show notes. And Katie's book is available both in paperback and as an ebook. Thanks for listening to today's episode of DNA Clarity and Support podcast. Head on over to watersheddna.com to learn more about the resources and support available for those involved in DNA discoveries.